Welcome back, and thank you everybody for joining today. I was just saying I was fangirling a little bit, just getting really, really excited to talk to Dr. Andy Hines about foresight. I've been reading about the work that he's done and the center that he runs, and so I'm really, really excited to learn more about instead of our normally strict definition of sight going into like a little bit of a broader of foresight and predicting the future or futures technically. And so thank you so much, Andy, for joining today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I think this is going to be great.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I do need to do that sort of obligatory, how do you define, futurism and future studies, just for those who are maybe not as familiar with it, to just make sure the lay of the land is there.
Sure. A few years ago, I did some work and we settled on the name of our field as Foresight. We in Houston. So I'm at the University of Houston, where we've had a Foresight program for 50 years now. It's the longest one in the known universe. And so we call it Foresight, and we say the short definition is the study of change. Somebody asks you, say, what is a futurist? We study change. And then from there, you can go a little bit deeper. So the one long sentence version is we use tools and a methodology to explore and identify the futures we want to work towards, avoid those we want to avoid, and then be ready for sort of anything in between that.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of people get nervous that it's like you can't really predict the future, but in
Right.
some ways you can make educated guesses about where it might go.
Mhm.
And so that's where I was wondering, do you consider foresight to be related to other disciplines or incorporating other disciplines or no?
Super, like we say, transdisciplinary might be the word, but you borrow from everyone, which in the university setting has made it challenging, right? Because we fit sort of everywhere but nowhere. And so, and really, in terms of how foresight has been practiced, I think it's doing really well in government these days, around the world, in the NGO space, and then even in the foundation, nonprofit sector, the corporate sector. But education has been a little bit more of a challenge. And again, I just the home is just not like a great fit in terms of where we fit.
Yeah. No, I keep on people. I was a psychology major undergrad and then worked in, brand strategy and all that. So I end up always kind of seeing things through the filter of that. And I was like, oh, that's psychology again. Like people are more comfortable sort of knowing the status quo and then I feel like what, foresight is like, okay, well, this is great. Like, where does that go? It was like, but let's push you a little bit out of that comfort zone, which to me is innovation. So I end up seeing the connections there.
Absolutely.
But is that something that you find too, that it's like people assume that they can guess what's next, but not always?
I spent about 10 years as an internal futurist. So at first at the Kellogg's and Dow Chemical. And essentially what I did for 10 years is used foresight to, if you will, spur, enhance, trigger innovation. And it was such a simple idea because it seemed to me that most innovation work was at the time looking backwards. What have we done before? And so I come in and say, well, how about if we look forward? And, that's a simple idea, but, I think I got 10 years out of it.
I almost, and because I like to oversimplify things, almost like I oversimplify it and then I correct that.
Yeah.
I feel like you're just at like, what's next? Like, okay, like what's happening here? So what's next? What happens next? And then you keep on pushing that, and that people can make guesses. It's just that they're not always so comfortable making those guesses
Right.
without those methodologies, of which, oh my goodness, when you start talking about the number of methodologies that are enforced, like I didn't have any idea how many. Could one oversimplify it as the what's next, but using tools?
Right. If you will, we're all futurists. We all think about the future. We just do it more systematically. And to your point about the techniques, I am now, I mean, I teach, right? That's what I do. So, and we say we try to introduce people to the future. We do a lot of project, a lot of training, in addition to the class, right? And what we've learned is like there's some basic things that everybody does, right? And if we can get those basic things into one's head, then when you look at all the different techniques, it's not like, oh my God, it's like, oh, I see what they're
That's
doing here,
psychology. To me,
right?
that's like psychology of like, I remember learning something in, undergrad, and it was like, if one person looks up, everybody looks up. And you're like, well, yeah, that's what people do. And they're like, no, there's a reason behind it,
Yeah.
And it seems there's a lot of like, well, you can predict the future, but the way that psychologically your brain is going to be like, well, it's going to stay the same. Like everything's going to stay the same. And it's like, well, not really.
Yeah. Sometimes it does for longer than we think. I think one of the things that I've learned is related to that over 35 years now doing the work is that actually like significant change, not like little change, but it actually takes longer than we think, right?
Yeah.
And it's because we watch it from its origins. We see the whole journey. Now, if you just pop in at the end, it looks like, what happened? It's like, this has been brewing for, we're like, whoa, but finally, we've been watching this forever.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's comforting, right? I think if you're if you decide to, as an organization to make that kind of a commitment, you'll say, all right, we're not going to get surprised. If we start doing our homework, we're going to see this stuff.
Yeah. No, I think that if you're surrounded by a lot of people that kind of know the same thing, especially if you're in
Yeah.
innovation and you're surrounded by other people who are innovators, what you think is innovative is very, very different than what most people do. It's like you get very biased by your surroundings. And so I think that that's true for anybody. It doesn't necessarily have to be innovators, that if you're like in your company and you're surrounded by your company and you have that culture and that you go, well, this is what will happen. It's like, yes, but there's other companies, there's governments, there's many, many other factors. I thought that was really fascinating, actually, is all the signals in foresight that you have to like maintain all this thing. How do you do that, like generally? And then I do have like a process that I want to go through for us, but I said I'm gonna be overly excited at the beginning about all the
Uh,
many, many questions I have, and then we can sort of go through some of the things that I'm hoping to cover.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. We would say horizon scanning is kind of like the core skill, right? I mean, being able to spot signals. And the trickiest part is not either get too excited and at the same time being able to hold space and not reject things that don't seem right. So like, can you just take a signal and kind of and literally create a scanning library, but in your mental space, just say, it's interesting. Let me hold on to that and not get carried away with it, but also hang on to it because sometimes you just don't know. And can you stay sort of agnostic and interested and not get too caught up in judging the signals? And I think that's where a lot of folks maybe go off the trail.
Absolutely. That's where I say to my students, I'm like, I love humanoid robotics. I'm like, I love it. I get excited. Any news about it, I'm super excited. And I was like, but do I have a realistic view of where it is?
Yeah.
Yes, I do. I'm more excited about it than most of the general population.
Hmm.
But I go, wait a second. And that I don't know. I feel like I want to dive deep on all of these topics, but I think I should pull back
Okay.
for a second, and I'm going to be really cheesy about this, and do a past, present, future.
Okay.
And and so I thought that we could do a little bit of the past and looking at you sort of personally in your career, but also professionally, and then do the same sort of the present and then the future, kind of
Okay.
structured a little bit that way. So first, the past. Looking back, could you have predicted your career years ago?
Well, I took this course as a newly minted grad student called Life Work Planning, and it may have been the best course I ever took. And I borrowed, incorporated a lot of those ideas in our seminar graduate course now. And it was basically like how to plan your life. It was personal futures planning, which is it's kind of an emerging like,
But it could
right,
happen now. I mean,
right,
now with all the like needing of flexibility for the way innovation is going, probably, should come
right.
back.
Well, if you're a life coach, why not be good at the future, right? I mean, that's because that's what kind of where we're going, right? So anyway, I stumbled into this course. I'm like, boom, this is great. And I mapped out a career that I wouldn't say I followed it precisely, but I had some big chunks of activity that, was decently accurate. So the only surprise, I think the major surprise when I mapped out, I originally thought I was going to be a journalist, a futures journalist. And then I found out that like you don't actually make any money in that space. So sorry to disappoint, right? So I know some people are like, yeah, no, right? It's like, oh, they don't pay for these
Written books
articles?
and articles and all
They don't
that.
pay
Like
for
you've
that?
still been able to incorporate all of that skill. I never would have guessed that I would have written anything like at all. Like
Right,
for me, the having co-authored books was like, what?
right,
Like the me of however many years ago would have been like, are you that's a joke, right?
right.
So you have been able to incorporate that writing and journalism in your career.
Yes. I have, but then quick, I kind of realized, all right, that's not going to be the number one thing. But it's like, in terms of people thinking about their own future, it's like I had the passion, right? So I just had to figure out where to take it because I loved it. I loved it, and I knew I wanted to do it. And like, so I was lucky enough to get an internship and kind of work, start working I worked in a quote think tank, which I know we were talking about thought leaders. We called it a think tank because we couldn't make any money, but we did really cool stuff.
But think tank, I mean, I've met people and they're like, oh, I work on a think tank. And I'm like, okay.
Right.
Like, but think tank, from what I understand, is much where it's like how to prepare government and policy, like how to prepare that like not maybe public sector for what may be occurring. Is that right or not right? I haven't like, kind of looked up the answer, but
Yeah, I would just maybe expand on that a little
sure.
bit, say that we also included the private sector in that. So we ran back in the day a lot of like multi-client consortiums. So we do like the future of work or the future of business, like really broad topics, future science and technology. We had a bunch of sponsors, and we would get together and do meetings and things like that. And it was just, I mean, it was just fabulous work. I mean, it was so fun. I mean, yeah, I think these days a little bit harder to kind of get that kind of work funded, just like pure thought, And I think that's probably one of the things that's changed the most about the field is we now if you're not to the discussion we had earlier, if you're not thinking about your value prop, so what and now what, right? Like, what do we do with this? Then it doesn't fly. So I think maybe back in the 90s you could get away with a little bit more thinking for the sake of thinking, and now we're a little bit more bottom line. But
Yeah,
imagine the formative experience that was. It was just
that's amazing.
unbelievable.
I mean, and then so you went from there to where did you go after that?
Well, I was a little discouraged, if that might be the word, with even though we were having fun, like our clients always say, well, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know what to do with
Right.
this, right? So I said, what is, if you will, what is the problem? So I spent the 10 years inside the two organizations trying to figure out why is it so hard to enact the future, if you will, or activate the future inside organizations, and just quickly learned why. But nonetheless, I was the funnest 10
Change
years of
is
my life.
uncomfortable. That's what it's like change is just uncomfortable. And that it's like you have to manage that somehow,
But
and
what a puzzle, right? What a
yeah,
challenge. And if you can unlock that, you're a hero, right? So it was really so cool. So it's like you had all this future knowledge, but it doesn't matter unless you can,
right.
kind of figure out a way to get it through the system. And so just, kind of uncovering, unlocking that, I just felt like it was just so much fun. I really loved it. And it surprised me. I didn't think I would like the corporate world, but I loved it. It was great.
Wow. And then so then what then led you to working at the university? Like how did that transition happen next?
Right. So there is a kind of a logical flow, I suppose, right? Because it's like, all right, we figured, kind of figured out how to get this stuff integrated into organizations and use it. And then say, all right, how do we teach futurists to do that? And so I went home, it was 20 years later to teach that. So we changed our curriculum a little bit to be more on that. How do we use the word activation now? How do you just make this stuff happen?
Yeah.
And that's what we're hearing. I mean, it's not good. We're not just doing this because his clients saying, help, help, help. And I've noticed we've gotten deeper and deeper and deeper into like almost like, my God, you really want us to do this? Like, you want us to build the spaceship? I don't know how to build a spaceship, but you know what I mean? Like, we're getting,
Unless you're Elon Musk, then you figure out how to build. It's okay. Sorry, bad joke, bad joke.
yeah,
Um, so how do you define value, or how do you find that it's accurate, or how do you like, because I think it has to be that kind of weird thing of like you're helping a lot of people figure out stuff, and then you said you're helping a lot of people potentially activate stuff, but then how do you go, oh, this worked, like this,
right.
foresight worked.
Yeah. So at a high level, the scenarios, we use scenarios to say, here's what the futures might look like, right? And, we'll do some narrowing down. It's not everything, but here's the interesting futures ahead. And then, if you will, it's kind of like it's a bit like it's not quite gambling, but you take options on those futures and say, all right, if this future happens, this would be a sensible thing to do, or this would be a sensible business or sensible policy. And then you watch and monitor. So like we don't guess, right? So it's not like you just hope for things, So you say, all right, this is the way, and then and then if it starts to trigger, right? If you go, wow, we're heading down that road. We got the boom, let's go.
Yeah.
So, the thing that's I think still challenging, right, is to be able to hold. We got six things we might do, and we're watching, and there's always this. Let's go. Let's just do stuff, right? Instead of be patient.
It is really hard. I mean, I think it's really hard to balance with all the like hype and hype cycle and all. It's like, well, we have to do something. And it's like, maybe, you
Right.
know,
Thank you. I like that.
maybe. Well, I remember I suggested to NYU, I was like, I want to teach avatars and virtual beings. And they're like, what? Like, what are you talking? And I was like, no, it's going to be, we talked about metaverse, we talked about AR and VR. I want to like, now we're going to talk about the people. And they're
Right.
kind of like, okay, go and do that. And then like 2 years later, NVIDIA starts talking about physical AI and conversation. And I was like, like, but I had to like sit there being the person where they're like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
why are you teaching about humanoids? And so I do think that if you can start to go, this might happen, you are going to have a certain amount of resistance,
Oh,
or this need to act immediately. And it's only after the fact that you're like, oh, well, yeah, see, we sort of knew, you know, is that something that you just come across over and over again?
we we train like from the get-go, like the second slide you see in the program is resistance is normal. Get used to it, right? It's okay. And once you accept that, it's like, oh, it's because I think at first people say, oh, I must be doing something wrong. No, it's just a normal thing. It's so you pay a little tax. We say as futurist, you have to pay a little bit of a tax because you got 20% extra because people don't know what the heck it is. So you got to explain what it is. You got to explain the value proposition. So just know you're going to have to pay that tax and pay it and shut up and stop whining. You know what I mean? Like that kind of
No,
thing.
but that's emerging tech is sort of the same way. I came up with this whole thing of like you have to explain what your technology is before you
Oh,
go into it and like what do we do differently? It's like for you have to explain what futurism and foresight is, and then you can actually do that work. So could you have guessed when you started then the program at University of Houston, could you have guessed, you said you've been there for a while, like what it's turned into now? Because we're right now, we're still in the past, and then we'll do a little present and future.
yeah. Well, I think so. Back when I was in the program 30 years ago, it was flourishing, doing well, but I think we were more in that sort of experimental phase where I say that you could have ideas for the sake of ideas. And then the program hit a bad low point, and had to rethink kind of rethink what we were doing. And that's when I came back in to kind of say, all right, I think we need to, take it in this different direction. And you've probably been through this before, the first 3 or 4 years, you could see things were starting to improve, but it's like, boy, am I doing something wrong? What is wrong? This seems like it's the right. And then, the thing that really helped us, it was kind of sad to say, but I mean, it's true, it was the pandemic.
Right.
Boom. I mean, the
Like,
interest in
did
the
you?
future just went through the roof.
Yeah. Well, it's can like, yeah, I think that that's one of those things of you said like the spotting the signals and managing the signal. Like it's really, how do you even know? Like that's where I think is one of the things that, at least to me, the whole idea of foresight in the whole, like, how do you know that if you see a thing, like certain
Right.
people are just louder, right? They complain louder, they predict louder or whatever, versus that doesn't necessarily mean that that's where the world is going. And is that, is that some of the things where you said you switched the program a bit?
Yeah. So one of the things we say is, look, when we do our stories or tell our stories about the future using scenarios, we say it's not important to get the events right, but something like this will happen. And so a lot of times it's like you get yourself, if you will, you get yourself in shape, right? You get yourself ready and you don't know what it's going to be, but something will trigger, and then if you're not ready, you lose the opportunity, right? And I think, in this case, one of the ways that we got ready that turned out to be fortunate, I think, was we went virtual a few years before the pandemic, because we saw that that would be, ooh, this is for a small boutique program, it's a way for us to reach beyond, just our local geography. This is good for us. And again, then when the pandemic came, we were like, bring it on, right? We're already doing it.
Yeah.
So, and I think, and a lot of times that's, when we're working with clients, it's saying like you're getting yourself in shape for the future and ready and doing the right things, and then, kind of waiting, and then boom, when that opportunity comes, you're ready. And that's so often people aren't ready.
Yeah, it reminds me almost of like for PR crisis management. Like they're coming in like maybe after crisis, but they're prepped. They're ready to go. Like somebody's going to have a crisis somewhere, and this is what we're going to do. And it's
Right.
like there could be good things or like how do we get ready to manage it? If that happens. And in that ways, they're kind of predicting the immediate future or the like current future as opposed to further out scenario planning. But I don't think of it as far like what is it, the woo-woo of a thing. Like it's just getting people to start thinking a little bit differently and in an organized and structured way, which at least as I learn more and more about it, for me, the at the time you said you're trying to make it more kind of, I guess, structured and academic and apply to things. What sort of happened from there beyond, the pandemic?
Well, I think, kind of fitting in with the theme of sight, like we say, what are we trying to do? We're trying to help people see something that doesn't exist, right? So, we're trying to paint a picture of the future so you can see this world in your head, right? There's different ways, there's different tools that we use to bring that future to life, personas and experiential futures and sci-fi prototypes, like you're saying, all those different techniques. It's really trying to help people when you say this is what it looks like, what's in your head, like what do you actually see, right? And I think that making the future more tangible has been like one of the huge shifts in the field over this time. Is like you mentioned, I think some design work, right? And one of the things that we have a design futures class now, and one of the things is, how do you create physical prototypes of what the future might look like, right? And so I
Which
think those were.
artists do that to a degree. I mean, like artists and writers kind of, who work in that sort of sci-fi way. And it's going, wait a second, you don't have to be, sorry, artists, I love you, but it's like you don't have to be one to be able to like imagine what might be possible, just trying to get, tap into a little bit more of the creative part of your brain.
I remember like one of the first times we did this, and this was, it was actually in the past, but it certainly was a foreshadow of the future. One of the projects we did, we built a set, like physically built a set. We hired actors and we trained some of the client staff and just created this whole experience, right? Around the retail, situation of the future. And it was awesome. And you could say, oh, now that was at the time, it was very expensive.
Well, it's embodiment. That's all the VR stuff. It's embodiment. If you embody it and you like go and live, well, now with a lot of the generative AI tools, you could probably like make things that are you're like, this seems a little odd, but I kind of get the idea,
Right.
of what is possible. So what are you working on if we can transition to present a little
Yeah,
bit?
sure.
What are you working on now? And what are you personally working on now? What is the
Yeah.
program working on now? And I do like your hindsight for your company.
Clever, right?
Bravo.
Wasn't me. Someone else thought of it.
But sort of what is happening in the now, however you define it.
It's kind of funny. The name Hindsight came from a column I wrote for a journal where I was reflecting each issue on the applied foresight in the corporate sector. And what a great set of columns in terms of like each week I try to think of, all right, what's something that I learned from direct experience about how we're applying this on the inside. And it was really it really helped me because there's nothing, no better way to learn than actually do it and then have to actually describe it to someone. What'd you do? Well, we did this. So that was actually a pretty cool thing, the hindsight columns. So right now, one of the things it's a personal thing, but we're certainly doing it in the program, is I wrote a book that it took about 10 years to do all the research on imagining after capitalism.
Yes,
And
there was quite a lot of that, which, it's one of those things where you start saying like the future makes people slightly uncomfortable. Yep, that topic definitely is, hits that slightly
doesn't it?
uncomfortable thing for me. So let's talk through it a
Sure.
second.
So it started the research in 2012 in grad school. The students who got really interested in it. So we have a spring gathering and where we do different topics. So we did after capitalism in 2012. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And it ended up tying in with some of the work that first got me interested in the field. It was called the image of the future. And again, thinking like, how do you actually see? And what the image of the future research book said is basically the most successful civilizations of the past, what they had in common was this guiding image of the future, a positive guiding image. We have a sense of where we're going.
Yeah. No, I've had this whole conversation with my co-author that I was like, everybody's saying like utopia, dystopia, or whatever, like this kind of, and I was like, maybe it's somewhere in between. It's probably somewhere in between. But okay, so you're saying guiding image of like where we're going and keep going with that before I interrupt out of excitement.
No, that's cool. That's cool. So what he said at the time was, this is like back in the 70s, that we don't have one right now. And it's 50 years later, and I'm thinking, so I'm looking at after capitalism, going, yeah, what is, and not that I didn't have anything against capitalism, but I mean, at some point, every system eventually runs its course, right? So what would be next? So I put those two things together, and I'm like, oh my God, there's a gap. We've got nothing. And if you will, even going back then, say if the capitalist system were to crash, we got nothing behind it, right? We've got a few failed experiments, but I don't think anyone wants to necessarily try those again. So what else? And then that sort of launched the research and to say what are some images that we might, if you will, start to work towards.
Right.
Let's have a conversation about them. Let's at least start
As
talking about
opposed
it.
to arguing. I feel like that might be, some of the, people aren't really having the open conversations of multiple options.
I mean that's definitely something I've noticed in the last 3 to 5 years is just that. Well, yeah, you're right. It's not discussion. It's people yelling at each other, and that's not very helpful. So, I try to stay out of that business. But I mean, in the meantime, I mean, can we do the homework to kind of make, if you will, is this whole thing about making those images more tangible and attractive, if you will. If we're going to replace the current system, we better have something that is better, if you will, or at least that has some appeal, right? Oh, why should we change? And we say you got to pay that 20%, maybe it's a 50% tax in this case to say, all right, if we're going to go to something better, it better be better, or something new, it better be better.
Yeah.
And so that's been the research and working on it been talking about it for a while now.
Yeah, and so but it's like the coming up with the vision or trying to like help people to understand the potential visions of it so that they're working towards, something as opposed to just sort of like looking every day. Like, what can I do today? I'm angry today, or I'm upset today. That you go like, okay, where do you go from here? I mean, I think that there are, not that I am by any means an expert on politics or politicians or the structure of things, but I think that, you know, politicians do try to create a vision, but the vision tends to be more of a tagline or a few sentences, and you're going, okay, well, what is this? What is this really? What does this mean?
Right. And I think the thing that's challenging, especially with the futures as a whole, and certainly with images of the future, which are by definition, I'm talking 10, 20, 30 years out, not next year, right? So these are definitely stretches, is that, we've been trained in our whole education system is all about bottom line, get into the details, start executing. It's like, well, first, I say, why don't we figure out where we want to go? What are we working towards before we start implementing plans? And so I think that's not something that we're comfortable with, right? Is we want to just get down to work. And it's like, well, not yet, right? And now, so then I think, I'm sure that you would come across this in the innovation space, right? We try to run pilots and experiments and try things out and learn as we go. Again, all in other uncomfortable things, right?
Right. To me, it's like a strategy versus tactics in a very like that it's like, well, no, we need to start posting immediately. And it's like, but wait a second, where are we go? Like there can be a ton of different strategies and a ton of different approaches that will then influence what we do today. And let's start thinking about that because then we can decide, we can do like a yes or no. Like, does this fit in that future that we want to go to or not, even if it might feel comfortable or uncomfortable at the moment, making those decisions, with something in mind. Speaking of the something in mind, where do you go next? We're going future for you. Where do you?
Well, so one of the things that, and this is probably more back to the program. So it's been 10 years that I've been running the program and started training the new team. So, we had our 50th year anniversary. I'm near, it's time for me to move on. So we've been working a little bit. What's the next iteration, right?
Yeah.
And again, I think it really comes into that sort of design, experiential prototyping kind of, and how do we integrate that into the curriculum? Of course, then of course thinking about AI, of course you got
Well, it's all this stuff
to.
there's all these people that in my mind, I'm like, I want to connect you to this person and that person, whatever. But one of the things is like generative AI in order to create scenarios or what things look like. I mean, it's based on previous, it's based on the past. So, and all the visions of the future look like sci-fi films, not shocking. So are you trying to go like, how do you pull in different, different tools, whether it be visual tools or learning from your existing materials to help predict? I mean, that was one of my questions on there is like, how are
Mhm.
you integrating that kind of like finding the signals or organize the
Yeah.
signals? Is that sort of in that future of the program or knowing your program, maybe you've been doing that for a couple of years already.
Yeah, well, we've always been you're always looking for tools, right? And hoping, right? And sat through a lot of demos over the years. And, they're getting better. And I think there are some things that we do that the new AI tools are just beautiful for. There are some things they can't quite do yet. And part of what I think we need to be very clear on is what is the difference? And you got to keep watching. It is changing. We do think that there ultimately like I guess our ethos is how can these tools make us smarter? And that's what we're trying to think about as
Well, I
opposed to
think,
being lazy, replacing and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, I think that they look good at first, like first pass. They look great, really smart.
Yeah.
And then you start going,
Mhm.
what is it saying? Like it
Yeah.
sounds like surface level sounds amazing. And then you go, huh, if I thought about this, I would think about it entirely differently. Like it becomes a conversation, not, a solution, a tool, not a replacement,
Isn't
at
that
least
great?
for me.
Yeah, I mean that's wonderful, right? I mean it can help us do better work, great. But I mean I think we just have to have that right mindset, and I think that's what we're doing. We're watching it. This summer we're going to do a whole elective on it. So AI and foresight, and just really focus our thinking. We've done a few projects on it. You can imagine, I will confess that we're always afraid, like, are we missing something? Oh my God, right? You better be up on things as a futurist, right? But I suppose we're human too, right? We can make but we're watching it carefully and we're playing with it and hitting it as best we can. And I think it's exciting and with that strategic use and not just the
Yeah.
the
I think
dumb
that, I
use of
mean,
it.
right now things are moving so quickly. It's been more my attitude. It's like nobody can keep up. Like I feel like the people who are the most knowledgeable that I know are overwhelmed. Like there's sort of like there's no way. There's no way everybody can keep up all at the same time. in the moment, but we will catch up. Like we'll eventually catch up.
Yeah.
But right now, it's like, wait a second, like four new tools launched today. Like hopefully things will sort of mellow and then we'll have this kind of new understanding. Yeah, I thought that was really one of the things, and this is maybe, I guess it is still a future look kind of thing, is in my class I just started, what was this past week, I looked into deep tech. And to me, deep tech and foresight overlap. Maybe I'm the only one, but I feel like deep tech to me is like instead of looking 3 to 5 years to what will happen, they're looking 10 years into
Hmm.
what would happen. And they're making guesses that eventually a technology, if scientists or engineers can figure this
Mhm.
out, it will exist in the future. And I
Mhm.
feel like to me, foresight is almost like the business or the culture or the government of going like it's like deep whatever, it's deep research or deep whatever of like where are we going? And it's like, and how can you predict that for you have the like three horizons.
Hmm.
And if you can just like touch on that for a second of what those three horizons are, so that even maybe it can help somebody who's listening or watching on YouTube understand, where things are going.
Absolutely. So the thing, and we'll use technology. It's a good example, tech development, right? So in Horizon One, the technology exists, right? It's a mainstream technology. We're all using it. Horizon Two, if you think of Horizon Two as the emerging behind it, like what's coming up next, what you see today is something that might be in the lab. There's a prototype, there's an experiment. You go, "Ooh, I think it's not quite here yet, but there's something tangible." And then that third horizon stuff, there's this real, 20, 10, 20, 30 years out maybe, is that first signal. We just ran an experiment and that looks pretty promising. And we know a lot more needs to be done, but you've got to prove the concept.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the easiest way to think of those. And one of the things that we've learned around technology is the first book that I worked on was the Science and Technology in 35 years, was that it's the context that we can't just forget the political, social
Which is
context in which.
foresight, I feel like pulls that in more
Yeah.
than any, you could bring in somebody who represents a particular, organization, but it's not the entire, like it's not geopolitical context that maybe people haven't necessarily considered unless they're in a think tank or unless they're, in government.
And yeah, that's often what's is a lot of times it's not the technological capability itself that's the problem. It's all the contextual factors that is the reason it takes longer than we think, right?
Yeah.
If you will, the generative AI. I mean, we were looking at that 30 years ago, going, "Oh yeah, you could see this coming," and it's just taken way, way longer than we thought.
Right. And you gave an example in a couple of your talk of working on driverless cars.
Oh yeah, right.
And you're like, this is,
1990.
we thought, like, we've been working in driverless cars forever. It's like, not forever, but like for 30
A
some
long
years.
time.
And how it would operate is what's changed, I think that's so cool. I
Right,
think,
because back then we thought we were going to put the intelligence in the road, as the concept has evolved, it's obviously now it's in the vehicle itself. You could see that, and that's the good part about, yeah, predictable is this. There is a way to say that without saying we're predicting, but there are things that, if you look, we're going to be able to do something like this. We don't know
I said it,
exactly how, but
absolutely. Well, I
something
said
like it will look something like this.
it will said if somebody says that I can foresee the future, like no, nobody knows the exact route, you know. And I think that is maybe some of the pushback is like was like, well, I'm going to talk to this person and they're going to tell me what the future. No, I'm not going to tell you what the future is, but I can lead you to have you understand that there's many potential things that you might not have seen that far out, but you actually can go and do that, and that's amazing. I mean, are there things that people can sort of do on their own initially? I know obviously it's like they can reach out to you. Where is your website? Like, is it the Hindsight? The
Yeah, it's Andy Hindsight.
Okay.
Or Houston Foresight, if you type that in, that's the academic program. They do training and stuff like that. But I mean, you can start signal scanning, horizon scanning right now. You just,
But how do you know if it's right? That's my thing. I mean, for me, I feel like when I do it, I just am like, oh, I saw that again. Oh, I saw that again. And then
right.
I do that, but I'm not doing it in a like structured, organized kind of. It's just my brain finds patterns, and that's just how it is. But if that isn't how your brain works, but instead, like, what are the ways that you can signal scan?
There's only three things you have to know or keep in mind.
Okay. I
You
love it.
know,
I'm writing them
some
down.
kind of mechanism to find, like where do you look for signals? What are the sites, communities? Where do you go find change, right? So think about that maybe more systematically. How do you find it? And then once you find it, how do you collect it? Do you have some kind of a bookmarking site or collection mechanism, right? And you'd be surprised because if you don't keep it, it's gone and you forget, right?
Absolutely.
Grab it. And if you find something that we say, if it passes the 90-second test, you sig the signal, you get it in the library in 90 seconds, you got a winner. If it takes longer than that, I'm busy, I'll do it later, it's gone, right? All right, that. And then the third thing is, as you said, is the analysis. And again, we try to say keep it light. There's no harm in having too many signals, really, other than a lot to sort through. But things like credibility, like is somebody trying to sell you something, right? Is it so and so put out a new technology by so and so?
Which, by the way, in all the thought leadership stuff, I mean, I created a way for my students to like write thought leadership content as a way to just sort of say, is there a formula to it? And there is. And it's like if there's the sales pitch at the end, then potentially the stuff
Careful.
near the beginning. That said, if you take multiple thought leadership on a particular topic and they all generally kind of agree, then it becomes a little bit more like, okay, this
Yeah,
is this is possible. But then you have to counter the hype. It becomes a whole. I love it though. I do love it.
right,
I do tell people though that you have to ride the waves, that there's the
right,
waves of hype, there's the waves of like adoption, there's the waves of all this kind of stuff. So
right.
but if somebody's just going and saying like, okay, I'm gonna go, I already know where I go. I go to Reddit or I go to whatever my feed and who knows what,
Mhm.
and then I, have the articles I'm gonna read or I have the books that I'm gonna read, then how do they do that kind of analysis?
Yeah, I would challenge, like, if you want to take the next step. I know we're just starting, but the next step is to say, all right, now I'm going to go outside my comfort zone. I'm going to go to sites and places that I don't or you agree with or don't feel comfortable. Like that's when you're starting to play the game, right? But there's things you think about when you said, are multiple sources saying the same thing? Obviously, that's a like, that's helpful, right? Would it have an impact? Imagine, if it does happen, would it really make a difference? And sometimes you find out, like, well, if you will, with driverless cars, I mean, you can see some obvious advantages, but I think in the beginning, when you looked at the hype, you're like, well, I mean, yeah, we could do that. Like so just thinking those things through, right? Is it true? Is it really new? Because sometimes we see something go, oh, and then we find out, oh, that's been around forever. So you got to do a little
I
homework, right?
love, I mean, that I love to do that. I love to go and look. And then because it also will, in emerging tech, it will get people really mad if you're like, well, this is a new technology. And it'd be like, they like give you the side eye, like a new technology. I've been working on it for my entire career and I'm, however many years old. Um, yeah, of like what would happen, what needs to happen in order to
Right,
have it. And it's not just this is a great new idea
right.
or it's a
What's
fun.
missing? Like, what's missing? Like, that's the other thing. Is there legal structure in place? Is there do people actually want this thing,
Right.
right?
But that's deep tech too. They said that people who invest in deep tech understand that there's going to be policy and there's going to be issues. There's going to be what, and I mean, granted, I'm researching the class and doing these podcasts at the same time, so I'm going to find more similarities than maybe were there. But I
Yeah.
do think that it's fascinating to me, this whole thing. So with that analysis, if they're able to kind of say, oh, that does happen, that might happen, where do you go? Like you said that at the beginning of this podcast, of like people would be like, that's great, we figured out this thing, now what? Like,
Well, I guess it depends on where you are. Sometimes, if you're an entrepreneur, you might just say, "All right, I'm going to go for this." And the beauty of entrepreneurship is, you can keep trying until you get it right. Where if you're working in an organization, you got to do a little bit more. Uh, you got to back up your risk, I guess, so to speak. So you might have to be a little bit more patient in that space. But I think if somebody has an idea that they really feel is compelling, do your homework and we talked about putting it in context. Like, so well, how would this idea fit in a world in which globalization, reversed, or, just try to imagine, like, how does
Extremes.
this idea fare in different contexts, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of what futurists do. We try to imagine not just the perfect scenario where everything goes right, but does it, how robust is it? Does it survive in multiple contingencies, right?
It's a stress test. It's like the
Yeah,
financial stress
thank
test,
you.
but
Great
it's like an
word.
idea stress test, a
Right.
concept stress test, which is this is me, is that I said I always end up bringing in, like, multiple industries and multiple multiple concepts. Be like, "Wait, this industry applies to that industry," and it's like the financial stress test, but instead it's like, is it a business concept or a technology concept or a future concept that can survive the best case and the, worst case or somewhere in between that is a whole other dimension. But thank you so much, Andy, for coming and chatting with me. And as you can tell, very excited about all of these topics and how to understand them. And you said people can reach out to you through University of Houston or on your own website or any other places, or are those the best bets?
I think those are the best. So the University of Houston Foresight program, and then myself, Andy Hines at Hinesight. So those are the two spots. And I think, just when you mentioned the enthusiasm you had, and it was just such a great conversation. I always said, there are harder ways to make a living. I mean, just imagine how fun this is, right? I mean, it is hard work, no doubt. But I mean, what a great way to. I'm just happy that I stumbled into this and been able to make a go of it.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much.